Good afternoon, I'm Charles Lejano. This is One News Now. With Metro Manila under general community quarantine, some devotees are now allowed to enter Quiapo Church for the first Friday Mass. Let's check out what's going on over there with Ryan Ang. He is reporting to us live. Ryan, how are the Catholic faithful reacting to this bit of good news? Ryan, can you hear us? Right, it appears we're having some difficulties reaching out to Ryan right now. Meanwhile, food stall owners are bearing the brunt of the coronavirus crisis. Some of them brave the uncertainty to open while under the GCQ, while those located in schools are looking at other locations to jumpstart their business. Shaila Francisco has more on the story.
This food park along Timog Avenue used to be packed with diners. Now just a few people trickle in. Some of the shops still decided to open, hoping they'll earn enough to pay for staff salary and additional costs to comply with existing public health protocols.
Minsan wala na kaming makakain sa araw-araw at saka minsan wala na pang gastos, saka wala na pang sahod, kaya open pa rin.
Aaron, meanwhile, has already disassembled his food kiosk in UP Diliman, saying he will now shut down his business. He says he can't rely on walk-in customers since classes are still suspended. Selling his food online also failed to net profits. He's mulling whether to open stores in other locations, but for now, he has to retrench his employees.
Nasa UP tayo, so wala pong klase until siguro walang contact ng mga klase until magka-develop ng vaccines. Hindi kayang i-sustain dito kasi hindi naman siya commercially known sa labas.
The Trade Department said around 56.43% of micro, small, and medium enterprises in the Philippines had to stop operations due to the global health crisis. Aside from the DOLE COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program, the government is helping affected workers through the Small Business Wage Subsidy through the SSS. Under the program, employees can get 5,000 to 8,000 pesos in subsidy each month for 2 months once the application of their employers are approved. But some beneficiaries are being asked to return the aid. This happens when their employers had to let them go between March 17 and May 31, 2020. Those who resigned during the quarantine and employers who misrepresented the application should also return the dole out. This worries Panfilo Jaba, who not only received a smaller amount compared to his co-workers, but is also unsure whether he's covered by this announcement. He's currently on standby, unsure when he can return to work. His employer runs a no-work, no-pay scheme.
Natatakot din kami, ma'am. Paano naman kami? Anong ibabayad namin kung babawiin nila? Hindi namin alam, ma'am, kung ano. Dapat hindi na lang sila namigay kung babawiin pa nila uli, ma'am.
The SSS clarified the program is intended to help employers retain employees, and the conditions were already clarified before application. The agency was also dependent on the employer's assurance on the employment status during the filing date. SSS tells employers it's their responsibility to coordinate with employees regarding the refund in case of termination and resignation.
Between the employee and the employer, kung meron silang mga arrangements kung paano maibalik yung pera, yung employee and employer po dapat may coordination talaga yan. Yung mga nag-resign, alam naman po nila yung patakaran ng programa. Sana na-remind nila yung mga empleyado nila at kumbaga nasabi yung mga pros and cons nito, lalo na sa programa.
SSS clarified they won't deduct the aid received by members from their contributions, since the source of the subsidy came from the Treasury Bureau. The SSS is giving affected beneficiaries until June 15 to return the money. After that, the program will be audited, and those who fail to return the subsidy may face criminal and civil cases. SSS advised employees with concerns not to go to its branches to avoid long lines. Instead, it's urging them to just email the agency. Shaila Francisco, We Are One News.
COVID-19 cases in the Philippines are still on the rise. As of 4 p.m. today, 244 more people were infected with the coronavirus, and more than 100 are fresh cases, while 76 were reported late. Currently, we have more than 20,600 who have contracted the disease in the Philippines. The overnight death count dropped to 3 on Tuesday, as the death toll is now approaching 1,000 people. At least 80 patients recovered from the disease, and so far, more than 4,000 people have gotten better from COVID-19 in the Philippines. The health department says it's now expanding testing to include asymptomatic cases. To tell us more about this, we have Greg Gregorio reporting live from Quezon City. Greg, does this now mean that anyone who wants to get tested can just walk in and do so?
Charles, according to the Department of Health, we are now at the 10,000 daily actual testing capacity. With this, we can actually expand our criteria for testing to asymptomatic individuals. But as to your question, this doesn't mean that anyone who wants to get tested can do so. According to the Department of Health, those who could be tested are asymptomatic individuals but with history of exposure or contact to an individual who tested positive for COVID-19, and also asymptomatic individuals who may not have history of exposure but having pre-existing medical condition. And also to clarify, while the DOH said we can now expand our criteria for testing to asymptomatic individuals, we still prioritize testing for symptomatic individuals because studies say they have higher transmission rate. And the DOH highlighted that testing is just part of the holistic approach or response against COVID-19. Thus, prevention is always better than testing and cure. Charles?
Right, Greg, we have the president of the Pediatric Infectious Disease Society explaining exactly why a positive PCR test would not necessarily mean that a person could be carrying a transmittable virus. Could you explain this further?
Yes, Charles, it was Dr. Anna Ong Lim, the immediate past president of the Pediatric Infectious Diseases Society, but a current member of the DOH Technical Advisory Council. She explained that there is a difference between positivity and infectivity. She meant that an individual who tested positive for COVID-19 doesn't necessarily mean that he or she is still infectious, because there are cases that the PCR test still find the virus from a recovered patient, but these are already remnants of the virus and these are no longer infectious. That's what she meant when she said that someone who tested positive for COVID-19 doesn't necessarily mean that he or she can still infect any other people around him. Charles?
Right, Greg, do we have any updates on the agency's validation backlog? I see here we still have 76 late cases that were reported. Does this mean that they have yet to collect all of the past case reports from the country's labs?
Yes, Charles, according to Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere, the DOH is almost done with their validation backlog. They are just waiting for the submission of the complete line list of one COVID-19 testing laboratory. Now, after this submission, they are expecting to just record only fresh cases in the coming days once the complete line list of the last COVID-19 laboratory has been submitted and validated. Charles?
All right, one last thing, Greg. I'd like to know whether the DOH has actually gone ahead and created a new committee for the disbursement of health benefits that the president has ordered to be expedited. And do you have any idea who may form a part of this team?
Charles, unfortunately, it was not discussed during the press conference or the virtual press conference for the Department of Health whether or not a committee has been established already for the distribution of these benefit or compensation for the family members of the fallen healthcare workers or to the healthcare workers themselves who had severe case of COVID-19. But the Department of Health highlighted or pointed out that they are aligned with the President's directive for the immediate release of these benefits or compensation for the healthcare workers and their families. In fact, they have already given one check of 1 million peso debt benefit to a family of a fallen healthcare worker, and 10 more are about to be given to others in the National Capital Region. And there are others given in other regions which were distributed by Secretary Francisco Duque III himself. Charles?
All right, thanks for that, Greg. And that was Greg Gregorio reporting to us live from Quezon City. The government is now ramping up its Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa program. In an interview with One News's Agenda, Program Director Marcelino Escalada says so far about 80,000 individuals have enrolled online for the Balik Probinsya program. Qualified beneficiaries who want to return to their provinces will receive stimulus packages from the government.
We have certain packages for individual traveling to the province, and we have a different package as well for families traveling to the province. So if I may share with that, the employment facilitation support is 5,000, and the capital seed fund, as you mentioned, would be 15,000 for individual traveling to the province. But if these are families traveling to the province, we will be providing up to 35,000 of transportation allowance, another 50,000 for livelihood employment assistance, and another transitory family support of 70,000.
But Escalada recognized that this financial package would eventually run out without a balanced development in the regions that could sustain jobs and open up livelihood. Options for those returning home. He said local and regional development councils would have to be tapped to create a sustainable environment for those returning to rural areas. And Escalada also explained that initial efforts for the Balik Probinsya program failed because the government employed a top-heavy approach that simply identified beneficiaries without ensuring enough incentives for their relocation.
The original proposal of Balik Probinsya relatively made it, relatively succeeded or relatively failed because we saw one findings that, again, tama yung sinabi mo, I would agree. There was no mechanism at the regional level that will handle the regional project management and monitoring.
With Metro Manila under general community quarantine, some devotees are now allowed to enter Quiapo Church for the First Friday Mass. Let's check out the situation over there with Ryan Ang. He's reporting to us live. Ryan, how did our Catholic faithful react to this bit of news?
Charles, devotees are delighted to hear that they are now allowed to enter the Quiapo Church here in Manila. Charles, during the start of the GCQ, the church allowed only 10 people to enter during their Mass. But since it's the first Friday of the month today, they started allowing 50 persons at a time to visit the church after the Mass, giving them 15 minutes each inside the church to pray. Protocols and safety measures are observed. They are implementing a no mask, no entry protocol. People also need to pass through the disinfection tent. Here, temperatures are checked and devotees' hands are disinfected. Inside the church, there are markings to encourage the faithfuls to observe physical distancing. During communion, it's the lay minister who approaches churchgoers. After each Mass, chairs and kneeling platforms are being disinfected. Earlier today, devotees patiently waited hours outside the church. Others rode the bicycle and walked just to be here. Just like 72-year-old Mang Dani, who walked from Parola to Quiapo to continue his devotion or panata. He even brought a chair so that he would be comfortable while waiting for his turn to go in. Same goes for Aling Jing, who went to Quiapo because she believes that going to church is more meaningful than watching Mass online. Other devotees were contented in praying and listening to the Mass at the perimeter. Charles, the Quiapo Church opened only one door for entrance and a separate door for exit to control the flow of people. The church is open from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and is conducting 5 Masses a day. But since it's the first Friday of the month, they are allowing devotees and churchgoers to enter the church until 6 p.m. today. Charles?
All right, Ryan, thanks for that. Para lang malinaw, 50 persons at a time lang ang pinapapasok ba at a time? Pero ang sabi kasi ng IATF, maximum of 10 under GCQ areas, which includes Metro Manila. Meanwhile, sa mga simbahan na nasa pailalim ng modified GCQ, pwedeng magpapasok ng 50% capacity. Anong masasabi ng Quiapo Church?
Yes, Charles, ang sinasabi nga ng pamunuan ng Quiapo Church is 10 ang allowed, based on the IATF protocol, 10 nga yung allowed para umattend ng misa. Pero ang sinasabi naman ng Quiapo Church, ina-allow nila after the Mass yung mga churchgoers na pumasok o yung mga devotees para makapagdasal 50 persons per batch at 15 minutes per person or per batch, 15 minutes para nga makapagdasal and so that they can do their religious activities inside for 15 minutes. Charles.
All right, thanks for that. Ryan Ang reporting live from Quiapo Church in Manila. It's time again to take a look at the global situation of the COVID-19 pandemic via this interactive map from Johns Hopkins University from the US. Total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases around the world has breached the 6.6 million mark at 6.651, and 47 confirmed cases all over the world. Almost 1.9 million of these came from the global hotspot, that's still the US, where the scattered protests are still taking place against police brutality. Meanwhile, the country with the second number of coronavirus infections is Brazil with over 600,000 cases. This is followed by Russia with 449,000 cases, the United Kingdom with almost 285,000 cases, Spain still rising with 240,000, Italy with over 234,000, and 227,000 in excess for India. Meanwhile, the global death toll has breached the 391,000 mark with 391,439 confirmed deaths around the world. The US tops that list as well with 108,000 fatalities. It is followed by the UK with almost 40,000 deaths, Brazil with over 34,000, Italy with almost 34,000 as well, when we have France and Spain approaching the 30,000 mark, and South American nation climbed the third spot with COVID-related fatalities reaching 34,000. And this comes after Brazil reported almost 1,350 new deaths on Wednesday night. That is the biggest spike in overnight deaths since the pandemic began. And just as Italy opens its doors to tourists, those who are planning to visit Venice might have to look elsewhere. The city was submerged in water, courtesy of a near-record high tide that was brought on by the storm from the Atlantic. Water level reached at least 45 inches on Thursday evening, the third highest mark for June. Well, with water that high, it could only mean that a quarter of Venice is flooded. Still, tourists at St. Mark's Square were seen enjoying the high tide. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World Online. I'm Charles Lejano. We are One News.